Alright, Thaumaturge, it's your turn. Alright, I'm gonna exploit vulnerability on the zombie. Okay, and why are you dealing bonus damage? I guess now I have to eat these. Howdy, my name is Nonat, and the Thaumaturge is a beefy class. I mean, the Alchemist is 11 pages long. The Fighter, the longest class in the core rulebook by the way, is 14 pages long. The Thaumaturge, 16 pages long. This is due in no small part to just how complicated this class is. Honestly, the Thaumaturge is one of, if not the most complex martial class in Pathfinder 2e, and naturally, people playing it for the first time are going to make mistakes, including me. So here are my top 5 mistakes you're making when playing a Thaumaturge in Pathfinder 2e. But first, we gotta talk shop. Look, you can't sniff around the Pathfinder community for very long before you come across Prophet, also known as Joshua Birdsong. For an entire year, Josh has been making one unique piece of Pathfinder 2e homebrew every single day. And now, going live today is a Kickstarter to smash all that content up together into one easy-to-reference book. Introducing Prophet's Tome. Like, low-key, I am in love with this cover art, mainly because I'm a sucker for blacksmiths. This is one crunchy book for your Pathfinder campaign. It has, and I quote, 40 plus spells, 100 items, 200 feats, along with 100 other character options, such as the Primal Instinct Barbarian. This book is entirely focused on bringing you content first, and I've been told by Josh that there is roughly 100 pages of content without artwork. This Kickstarter is gonna fund both the ability to put it all together into one sellable product and get some quality artwork done for the most notable entries. Josh has also made it a point that the content in this book is not a mystery. If you want to see the exact level of quality you're going to get from Prophet's Tome, check out Prophet with a 0 instead of an O on Twitter. You can see a bunch of his daily homebrew that he posts there to see exactly what you're getting if you back this project. And also while you're there, give him a follow on Twitter. Come on. The Kickstarter just went live today, so click the link in the description to check it out and help them smash their goal to make this book a reality. And yes, there are stretch goals to add even more content to this beefcake of a book. Thank you so much, Prophet's Tome, for sponsoring this video. Now let's talk about the Thaumaturge and how everybody's playing them wrong. Aha! Caught you! I got you before you left the most obvious comment in the world. I've never made any of these mistakes, because I've never played a Thaumaturge. Gotcha. Now your comment means nothing. Okay, moving on. Mistake number 1 is something I, with my 3000 IQ mega brain, caught during character creation because I'm just so smart. I'm kidding, I'm actually incredibly dull. And that mistake is not having access to a ranged weapon regardless of your Thaumaturge build. At first glance, a ranged weapon and a Thaumaturge don't seem to mix. The Thaumaturge always needs to be using one hand to hold their implement, so they can only use one-handed ranged weapons, which there's not that many. Really, hand crossbows and small firearms. And even those have the issue of needing to be reloaded. On top of that, a lot of people don't seem to realize that the Thaumaturge's exploit vulnerability does still work with ranged attacks. If you attack with a hand crossbow on someone you've inflicted a weakness on, it still triggers. But why is it so important to specifically have a ranged weapon on every Thaumaturge? Well, that's because the Thaumaturge is a very action-heavy character in the first 1 or 2 turns of every combat, especially if you're ambushed. If you get ambushed, you will need to draw your weapon, move up to a target, exploit vulnerability on that target, and attack that target. Correct me if my math is wrong, but that's 4 actions in a 3-action system. Having a ranged weapon option, however, eliminates one of those actions. Now, you can draw your ranged weapon, exploit vulnerability, and take a shot at them. Boom, you got to attack on the first turn and exploit vulnerability. An added bonus to this is that the enemy now has to waste their actions getting closer to you, and even if they don't, on the following turn, you're gonna have more freedom of movement because you've already exploited the target. On your second turn, you can easily drop your ranged weapon as a free action, draw your melee weapon, move up, and attack. Or sometimes it's more advantageous to stay back and keep ranged attacking. Now, this is why I will recommend specifically thrown weapons like daggers and chakrams for your Thaumaturge. Daggers and chakrams both work as really solid melee weapons, but they can also both be thrown, meaning having 2 or 3 of these weapons on hand keeps you relevant no matter what distance you are from the target. If you have those awkward turns where one more stride just won't quite reach the target, you're 5 to 10 feet away from them, you can just choose to attack instead and chuck your throwing dagger at them, triggering their weakness. If you don't have a ranged weapon at all, you're going to have a lot of turns that end in an awkward situation with you trying to juggle exploiting vulnerabilities, moving, and attacking. Mistake number 2 is going to sound incredibly stupid, because it is. And I made this mistake for 2 full sessions. Don't forget Implements Empowerment. That's it. That's the mistake. Forgetting this exists. I don't know why this one paragraph is so easy to overlook, but every time I look through and talk about the Thaumaturge, I forget Implements Empowerment exists. Which I shouldn't, because A, it's super simple, and B, it's borderline broken. As long as you're holding an implement, all of your attacks deal 2 more damage. Flat out. Period. Full stop. That's half of a barbarian's rage. When I found out that I'd been missing 2 free damage on every single one of my attacks, I just about threw my book out the window. And my book is a PDF, so that would have been very expensive. Like I said, it's a stupid mistake, but I guarantee I'm not the only one who's ever made it, and someone out there just had their mind blown that they were missing free damage on every single attack. You're not alone, buddy. You're not alone. Mistake number 3 affects higher level Thaumaturges, and that's not picking complementary implements. It's easy to just look at the strongest implements and pick those, but just because they're strong by themselves doesn't mean they work well together. It's not super well explained in the book, but of the 9 implements, they are divided into 3 categories: active, reactive, and passive implements. Ideally, a really high-level Thaumaturge will have 1 implement from each category to give them the ability to capitalize on each opportunity. Reactionary implements especially don't work well together, as you only get 1 reaction per turn, unless you specifically take the level 14 feat that gives you a second one. And even then, you could just use 1 reaction twice. You don't need 2 different ones. With 1 implement of each category, you'll always have something you can do on your turn, between turns, and a consistent passive benefits ongoing at all time. So while it might be really tempting to take Chalice and Mirror and Wand, you'll never have enough actions to use all 3 of those in 1 turn. You'll still have the option to use any of the 3 active implements, which isn't a bad thing, but you'll only be able to use 1, maybe 2 of them per turn. Also, I'm only mentioning this here because I know the comments will scream at me if I don't mention it. Yes, I know after level 7 you can switch implements as a free action as much as you want, but it still makes it hard to use active implements more times, especially if you're trying to use physical attacks in between them. Mistake number 4, not taking advantage of encounters comprised of the same enemy. This is another small tidbit of information that I'm sure a lot of people overlooked, because it is a single sentence in a single paragraph within the description of exploit vulnerability, which in itself is 7 paragraphs long. Did I mention this class is complicated? In case you didn't know, if you exploit vulnerability on a target and specifically take advantage of a mortal weakness, your attacks will trigger that weakness on the target of your exploit vulnerability, and it will also trigger that weakness on all creatures of the same type. So if you exploit a troll's mortal weakness to fire, and there's 5 trolls in front of you, you start triggering that weakness to fire regardless of which one you attack. You do not need to re-exploit each troll, so you exploit once and then just wail on them for the entire encounter. Now, just so you're aware, these extra trolls are not considered the target of your exploit vulnerability. Only the original troll is your target. If you wish to use any abilities that specifically target the target of your exploit vulnerability, you will need to re-exploit a new troll to hit them with such an ability, normally Intensify vulnerability. But yeah, if you're fighting a bunch of low-level goons that are all the same type of monster with a shared weakness, just exploit one of them and go to town. And mistake number 5 is not exploring archetypes on your Thaumaturge. The Thaumaturge is a special kind of class. Because their base kit with exploit vulnerability is just so incredibly powerful, their feats are pretty weak in comparison to other martials, at least at lower levels. Level 2 especially is pretty limited. You can call your implement to your hand, you could get a familiar, you can make some talismans, but a lot of these feats don't fit the Thaumaturge concept that a lot of people might be going for. If that's your case, don't just shrug and take one of them because you don't have a better choice. Instead, consider exploring the 150 plus archetype options available to you. Snag an animal companion with Beastmaster, get some healing with the Blessed One, or multi-class and get some spellcasting or alchemical items on your character. Archetypes are honestly slept on in this game, especially on a class like the Thaumaturge, which is already so daunting in and of itself. With how deep this class is right from level 1, it's easy to understand why some people would be afraid or not want to commit to an archetype because their base class is already so complex. But trust me, archetypes are not as scary as they seem. In fact, I have some videos right here that can tell you exactly how some archetypes work to maybe give you some ideas for your Thaumaturge. That's it for me, y'all. That's 5 Thaumaturge mistakes. Let me know if you agree with me or disagree with me in the comments below. I'd love to hear if there's any other mistakes I might have missed around this class. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons and YouTube members. If you would like to also support the channel, consider joining by hitting the join button below the video, or just leaving a like does wonders. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, no nat ones.